All right, so welcome to the Cycling with Style group. We meet here, and then we'll meet in the gym later, and we'll do our cycle dances. We're the computer security group, actually. If you want to cycle with style, though, you should hit Andrew up. He does that in his free time. So if you want to get involved, we have a Discord here. If you wanted to get that cycling with style joke, Andrew made it on the Discord earlier. We have fire talks. We're going to have them in October. Any technical talk you want to give, 10 to 20 minutes, any technical material you think that would be good for members to learn or you just want to share, please go ahead and sign up. We have one person signed up currently. It'd be great if we had between 3 and 6, but that's just go ahead. If you have problems public speaking, you're uncomfortable with it, you don't know how to present, just hit us up. We're happy to help. We would just love to get y'all involved and just talk in front of the group. If you want to live stream, let's say you want to do like a Crack Me or a CTF challenge or something like that, and you want to live stream how it works, just hit us up. It's whenever you want, asterisk, because we like to have an officer there to be helpful with the stream as needed. But as long as someone's available to sit and help as needed, whenever you want is great. And then we're also running a CTF, ctf.utdcsg.club. Feel free to check that out. Do some challenges or write some challenges. We've had a couple people write challenges. Henry wrote a really hard one, if you want to try that one out. If you're interested in either side, we're happy to help you out, whether you have questions about how to solve them, or questions about how to write a challenge, or questions about how I'm hosting the CTF. Any of those, we would be happy to just get you involved there. As far as events go, we have a hardware hacking hangout, I guess is the best way to put it, probably Friday at 7 p.m., unless that's subject to change. But I just bought a Lenovo X230, and I want to flash a custom firmware on it, but I was going to invite you all to join me in that process. I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'm interested to see what it's like. So if you're interested in flashing the BIOS chip in a laptop for custom firmware and how that works, I am too, and we'll be figuring that out Friday. Seesaw CTF is going all this weekend. It's like a 48-hour thing, I believe, but we will be in the lab from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday. Check out what we're doing. If you have no idea how to do a CTF, please come. We will help you. If you have tons of ideas how to do a CTF, please come and help people who don't. But it should be really fun. For those who don't know what a CTF is, it's a capture the flag competition. It is basically very modular security challenges that you attempt to break and get a flag, and then you enter the flag into a website and you get points. And then next week, the company Elastic, the people who made Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana, all of those things, they will be coming and talking about security in some form or fashion. You should bring your resume. I don't know if they're hiring or not, but whenever we have a security, any sort of company come, I would recommend to have your resume on hand just in case. But I'm not sure if it's directly a hiring event, but they will be talking about how they do security at Elastic, which should be pretty great. And then on to actual presentation. So the goal for tonight is to answer the question, how do I get started? Because we get that a lot. If you already know how to get started and you see something that I didn't put on a slide that you think should be on the slide, please raise your hand and interject, because we have plenty of people here who know how to get started in security. This is my opinionated take on it, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily the 100% correct take. So if you have any ideas, please shout them out, interrupt me, and it'll be great. So just a precursor for those of you who are just now getting your feet wet. Plenty of resources exist online to get started in security. It is a really well-developed field. Not every resource is great, but the resources are there. But the fact of the matter is you get out of it what you put into it. If you just come to our meetings once a week, you will probably know more than you did at the beginning of the semester. But no one I know that is particularly good at security only does it for 30 minutes or an hour a week. So if you really want to be good, I encourage you to learn on your own time, because that's really a big portion of what this is. But so we're talking specifically about exploitation or offensive security, whatever you want to call it. And so the general goals are going to be lateral movement, command and control, and data exfiltration. And that's going to take a whole host of different things. And so we're going to look at how those manifest themselves in different fields of exploitation. And so this is a non-comprehensive list. I think it's an easy way to break it down and somewhat aligns with how we're planning our meetings this year. But you have network-based exploitation, system-based, which is probably Linux or Windows or phone apps, kind of. Cryptography, web-based exploitation, which is also similar to phone apps in some instances, and then binary exploitation. And before we move on to that, some general tools if you have actually no idea what you're doing. If you're looking for Windows-based stuff, reversing and doing binary exploitation on Windows binaries, the Flare VM is a pretty good setup provided by a company called FireEye, and they provide all the tools you need, or a script to get all the tools you need, and is what their malware analysis team uses to do malware analysis. And they are one of the best malware analysis teams in the globe. So I think they know what they're doing, but you can check out the VM and see if that suits you. For more general, regular exploitation stuff, whether you're doing a CTF or a pen test or something like that, Kali Linux is pretty great. It comes with most of the exploitation tools you'll need pre-installed, and a lot of tools you don't need pre-installed. But if you have no idea what you're doing, it's a great thing to download. You can run them in VMs, and you'll have a good time learning. So just moving on, what is network exploitation, and what does that look like? Generally speaking, it's accessing a network and network services, and it's often used to then access machines on another network. So it's probably accessing a Windows domain, attacking cloud infrastructure, things like that. If you're looking into this and you've never done anything before, you should probably check out Nmap. If you're not doing network exploitation and you're just doing anything, probably should learn Nmap. Like, that is a tool of the trade that literally every security professional should know. And if you're looking to practice this, there's Hack the Box, which is a penetration testing based CTF site. It has Windows and Linux machines on it, and they're all networked, so you have to do network scanning to find out information about them. And then relatively new is this service called CloudGoat. So for those who have never heard of a GOAT platform, they're generally insecure by design platforms designed for you to learn how to hack them. So CloudGoat is a setup where you can deploy a vulnerable AWS instance and hack it. It's pretty neat. It's doing a lot of AWS specific stuff, and AWS is currently in high demand whether you are attacking it or whether you're deploying it. And so if you're interested in AWS stuff, CloudGoat is a pretty good way to get started. And also, like I said, if anyone has any interjections, or like Andrew's making concerned faces, please feel free to interject.
Any kind of concerned faces. This is perfect.
What was that? Yes, I will post the slides, and we're also recording to YouTube. If for some reason you really enjoy listening to me talk, you can whenever you want.
Every night.
So then there's Linux exploitation. If y'all have never used Linux before, it's just another operating system similar to Windows, but better. It's open source, and thank you. Yeah, go for it. Oh, no, that is not, no, get out of here with that, no. Well played. So what do you want to do on a Linux box? You're escalating privileges, becoming the root user, exfiltrating data. A ton of companies use Linux as their servers. That could be a database, that could be any sort of store of important data. So if you see a Linux server, odds are in favor you're going to want to do data exfil on it. Establishing persistence, and then more. Examples, couldn't think of a good example of what this looks like. It's hacking Linux. If you haven't seen Linux, you should check it out. If you have, you probably know what this looks like.
So if it's Linux, it's either like super awesome and it's got like all of the data you want to execute, or it's a embedded IP file, which you might not care about.
Yep, that's fair. Yeah, Linux is very popular in embedded systems, so if you're on the IP phone, that may probably not be useful. Very good point. So tools, Bash, because that's probably how you're going to be interacting with it. Especially if you're doing exploitation, you probably don't have a GUI, just because, you could, but that'd be an interesting way to do it. Metasploit, if you haven't seen Metasploit, it's this framework that has a bunch of utilities and exploits all bundled together for you. It's kind of heavy, and its Linux base is not great for system exploitation. It exists. I don't really use it whenever I do any Linux exploitation, but it is there, and it's worth knowing about. But really, the best tool on Linux is Linux knowledge. When you're doing system exploitation, life can be way easier when you know where to check vulnerabilities are going to exist. And I think the best way to get that is just to use Linux somewhat regularly. If it's your daily driver, you will know a lot of ways things can go wrong, because they go wrong often, unfortunately. But Linux knowledge is definitely the best tool for Linux exploitation. If you want to get started, Over-the-Wire Bandit is, I think, the best way to learn Linux in a fun way. It's really simple. Some of the challenge, like the last challenge, is really goofy, and you're just like, I don't know why this is the way it is, and you'll be really angry when you finally finish it. But the entire process is worthwhile whether you know Linux or not, because it'll force you to reevaluate your fundamentals and make sure that you actually know what you're doing on a command line. Again, Hack the Box. Hack the Box probably has 70% Linux machines. That ratio kind of fluctuates. There's quite a few more Windows now, but there's a lot of ones. The variety on Hack the Box is interesting. Sometimes the privilege escalation is really trivial and annoying, and sometimes they're pretty good. So it's just kind of you get what you get. And then there's Metasploitable 2, which is a VM provided by the people who wrote Metasploit, and it's really designed it as a testing ground for Metasploit, and this is how you use Metasploit, but it is a Linux VM, and you can actually learn some Linux stuff on it.
To interject on Metasploitable, for your network, if you're setting it up, don't let it have internet access.
Yep.
You will be hacked. Like, period.
On
if you want to be hacked, you know.
Onto Windows, escalating, same thing. You're doing more or less the same things, except for Windows is often more likely to be a user workstation, or it will likely be something domain related, not necessarily a public-facing service. There are public-facing services that run on Windows, but I think the ratio is more in terms of Linux on that. So examples, again, hacking Windows, it's just kind of its own thing. Tools, PowerShell. If you don't know what PowerShell is, it's kind of like the Bash counterpart on Windows. It is a glorified wrapper around the Windows kernel API, and that's more or less all it is, which is incredibly powerful. And as of last summer and somewhat this summer, it is like the de facto exploitation language on Linux, on Windows for like pen testers. Malware, maybe not, but whenever you're actually on there trying to exploit, PowerShell has been a wonderful tool for offensive people. That's slowly moving to C#, but did someone say something? It can send email. So if you want to send an email, don't open up Thunderbird or Gmail. Use PowerShell.
You can send an email as someone else if they don't do like filtering, which send it as Andrew. Sure.
There's also Metasploit, which is the exploitation toolkit for Metasploit, like for Windows, is much better. They have things like local. Question I just saw. So can I run Nmap on Google or any website? So that's like that's a good question. I think the answer, and honestly, the answer is yes. I don't think anyone's actually going to care, but you shouldn't. 1 second, let me get my questions back.
So if Nmap, it's a port scanning tool, right?
Yeah.
One way to visualize that, and it's a sort of rough metaphor, port scanning a website is sort of like going up to a building and peeking in through windows and that sort of thing. You can do that. It's not illegal. The person in the house might get annoyed, though.
Yeah.
Like, you might get blocked if you're excessively scanning somebody's stuff.
Or if you're on a network that for some reason you need to do academic work and you decide to scan it and then they block your IP address for a period of time, that could be a bad time and you may not be able to do the academic work necessary.
UTD will do that. In 24 hours.
So don't also just like don't be like the rules like don't be a dick. Like don't scan a network that you're not supposed to be scanning. It's just rude. And it's going to make people angry with you. But also, Metasploit. Metasploit has a lot of good tools for Windows. If the Windows system is kept up to date, you may not find a lot, but they have like a local exploit suggester that will just scan the box for you and say, hey, here's what you can do to get privilege escalation. Things like that. But that's really dependent on how good the Windows admin is doing. And also, isn't local exploit suggester really easy to catch?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're trying to be sneaky, maybe not the best tool. Oh, that's also, if you're trying to be sneaky, Metasploit's probably not the best tool. Just like blanket statement.
Or bare PowerShell, like that's not even the best if you're trying to be sneaky. Yeah.
And then Windows knowledge.
You want to interface directly with the Windows kernel API if you want to be sneaky because no one logs it, and if they do log it, there's so much going on in the kernel and like so much information that gets sent out that they're not going to be able to catch you. But you didn't hear that from me.
And that falls back to like Windows knowledge, like just knowing the Windows API and how that works and how you can call that sneakily is a good time. In Linux versus Windows, Linux, almost everything is a file, and a lot of things are interacted as such. Windows, everything is an object and you access via an API rather than reading the file system. And it's a very, very different paradigm when it comes to exploitation. You're going to be writing malware that does API calls, or malicious utilities, not necessarily malware, that does API calls. Linux, you may not need as many. You're likely reading the disk to get enumeration, stuff like that. But then again, practice. Hack the Box has some decent Windows boxes. I have found, which my Windows knowledge is less than my Linux, so that could be part of it. But the Hack the Box Windows privilege escalation stuff tends to be a lot better than the Linux stuff. The Linux privesks I have not been super impressed with and have found somewhat trivial in most cases. Metasploitable 3, you need a Windows license in some form or fashion. You have a 30-day trial before it kicks you off the trial version, but Metasploitable 3 will take a Windows instance and put a bunch of vulnerable services on it for you. And that's also provided by the same people as Metasploitable 2 and Metasploit, so I check that out if you're looking in just really basic Windows stuff. And then Immersive Labs, which Alan has linked before, and if you Google Immersive Labs, it'll pop up. They have a guide to learn PowerShell, which if you want to do Windows exploitation, I would say it's essential. Would you agree, Andrew?
Yeah.
So learn PowerShell. Otherwise, you're going to have a really bad time, because if you only ever use the GUI, it's really hard to get a GUI interface back from popping a process. Like just not going to be a good time. But it's a lot easier to get a shell back. And so if you know PowerShell and how it works, you can be ready to go exploiting if you were to pop a process.
The VMs for Windows 2, you actually can completely legitimately go to their website and look up their development VMs, and it's just a VM that they have like Visual Basic installed on, and you can use that for I think 160 days.
Something like that.
So if you want to do that, it's a better option.
Someone else, I heard someone speaking. No? Okay. Cryptography. Breaking ciphers, forging signatures, doing magic with a question mark, because it's some interesting stuff. Some actual practical examples that you'll be looking at. Really popular now, forging authentication tokens. JWTs, or JSON Web Tokens, have been a big thing recently as we're moving to what's it called? There's a new authentication scheme that uses them that's pretty popular, particularly in new web scale deployments. And so knowing how those things work and knowing some basic pitfalls that we have seen across a multitude of encryption schemes is useful. And that's the more practical side. The less practical side is actually breaking poor implementations of things, not just they accidentally allowed you to do the null cipher, which you don't actually have to encrypt. But it's a lot harder, and I find that when you really spend a lot of time on crypto and actually really learning it, that's kind of it's your own self-track, because the people who are really good at crypto go work for a group that does really good crypto, and that's probably what they do as their job. But tools to get started, if you're interested, Sage, which is a language kind of built on top of Python, and it has a lot of number theory libraries built in. So if you're doing a crypto challenge that requires you to do hard number theory tasks, Sage can likely do it for you. That was pretty popular in Plaid CTF 2 years ago. All of their challenges were Sage-based, and they were doing some really crazy math stuff. But if you knew Sage, you could just run the function that Sage would give you, and you would solve the per challenge fairly easily. So it's worth checking out. It's a pain to install. It's really bloated. But if you're into crypto, Sage is pretty good. If you're doing some less heavy math stuff, Python is really great. You can do a lot of easy data formatting and manipulation in Python. And so for the more basic stuff, just encodings and stuff like that, Python is pretty simple. And lastly, just patience, because crypto can be very obtuse and a lot of really heavy math, and that's not everyone's ballgame. But then for practice, there's actually some really good crypto sites that are a lot of fun. There's CryptoPals, which is John Hatch here? No? No. So there's a guy who's in Discord, has done some CryptoPals. He really enjoyed it. And then ID0-RSA, which I have done quite a few of, and I really enjoyed. I can't speak to CryptoPals, but ID0-RSA is they give you a bad implementation of a crypto algorithm, and they force you to break it. And it's a very, very fun thing, but also crypto is just time-consuming because it's a lot of math. And so if you like that, would recommend. If not, would not recommend, just speaking honestly. So web. Probably the things we'll be doing, dumping databases, gaining code execution, breaking web scale, and learning too many frameworks. Examples of what this looks like: SQL injection, code execution, local file includes. The breadth of web is ridiculous because so many things we do now are websites that you could be doing a whole host of languages. You could be exploiting a bash web server if for some reason the idiot wrote that. There's like the web like stack is just huge. And so tools to get started, Burp Suite and Python and browser developer tools are a go-to for pretty much anything you're working with. But then just knowing various languages and the frameworks that use them, Ruby on Rails, anything Java, Spring Framework, Python, Flask, Django, things like that. There's just a ton of technologies that exist in the web stack. So having a good breadth of knowledge will make you a much better web exploiter. And then examples of good places to practice. Hack the Box. A good majority of the Hack the Box boxes, the first step into user is a web challenge. Andrew demoed Celestial, and that was a Node.js server. But that's pretty common. There's a lot of PHP on there. There has been some Python. It's pretty across the stack on Hack the Box. Over the wire, there's a exploitable called Natas, which is some more, I guess, classical web exploitation. I don't think they have any of the newer frameworks on it last time I checked, but they have a lot of PHP stuff, some very basic. They're not escaping your inputs. They're not doing any data sanitization. Very, very classic attacks that work across a broad number of frameworks. And then lastly, a WebGoat, which is another one of those goats. This one's provided by OWASP, which is a web application security group. And it's designed to teach you web application security. You have to run it yourself, but it's good software and a good way to learn, especially in a controlled manner. Do you have anyone else have any web? Because web is really broad. Okay. And then lastly, as far as exploitation topics, binary exploitation is like exploiting flaws in a program to do quote unquote fun things. And this is among other things like bypassing authentication, because if there's an authentication routine that you can skip, you're good to go. Or very popular gaining code execution, so running whatever you want inside of that process to do whatever malicious thing you want. Tools in general you're going to be using are debuggers and disassemblers. GDB is pretty popular. WinDBG is pretty popular. Things like that. And then disassemblers, IDA Pro is probably the de facto one. Everyone I know that does it professionally has IDA Pro, but Binary Ninja exists. Radare 2 exists. There's Hopper exists. There's quite a few. But then practice, binary exploitation practice is actually pretty great. There's quite a few different sites that do it. Pwnable.kr is pretty good. They have a bunch of different variety, and they're skill grouped. So there's like Baby, which is supposed to be really easy, and they work their way up until like ridiculously hard. There's a Protostar VM that tries to walk you through different areas of binary exploitation and learn as you go, which is pretty good. And then we also have an assembly group on campus, led by Henry up here, that they will be doing assembly all semester and probably future semesters, I assume. And aren't y'all going to be doing quite a bit of reverse engineering and binary exploitation?
We're actually doing that. We're doing intro to reversing today, actually.
Yeah, so if you're interested in that, you should check them out. It's a pretty in-depth topic, which is why we don't cover it a lot here. We try to be more broad, but Henry's really, really good at it. And so if you want to learn from someone, learning from someone who knows a lot is a good deal. So you should check them out.
And there's another thing I would recommend for binary exploitation.
Go for it.
So there's actually a really good YouTube channel called Live Overflow.
Yeah.
And he actually does a lot of stuff in like binary exploitation stuff.
Yep. He also goes over the Protostar VMs if you're interested in those, which can be really helpful having someone actually explain it. And that's actually leads me to the next thing. So overall, how do you be good at security in a very broad sense? Being well-read can give you a really significant edge, because on both sides, it's very much a cat and mouse game of someone finds an exploit, then they patch the exploit. Then the next group finds the exploit again or a new one, and then they patch it. So if you're up to date on that cycle, you can catch the gap of they haven't developed a patch yet. And so being well-read, or well-read in quotes, because a lot of times it's watching a video, can be really, really great for either discovering new techniques or using techniques that have not yet been blocked. So as far as YouTube for tutorials go, there's Live Overflow, like Henry mentioned. And then there's also a guy whose name I can't pronounce. He does some interesting stuff. He has one of my favorite videos on how to do ROP chaining, because he talks about it in very, very simple terms and how to use that with Python. And I thought that was really good. And he does a lot of CTF write-ups, stuff like that. As far, yeah.
I'll make a recommendation for YouTube tutorials. If you're wanting to get into hack the box stuff, this guy called Hipsec.
Oh, I forgot him. Yeah.
He does a lot of write-ups on the legacy boxes, and he goes through this whole process, and he will actually sometimes do multiple different ways of exploiting a box. He's very good at explaining it, so if you want to learn kind of the process about how to go about doing black box hacking, he's really good to go.
Yeah, I would second that. So as far as like talks, so for those of you who are not familiar, there are a ton of security conferences that go on, and most of them will record their talks and put them on YouTube reasonably after the conference. Some of them are better than others. The CCC, the bottom link, is one of the best that they actually like live stream their event, and you can watch it whenever you want. DEF CON and Black Hat are hit or miss yearly, how quickly they get them up and how many of them they get up. But if you're looking at what is cutting edge research for 2018 or 2017, the talks are really great. DEF CON tends to be more chill. Black Hat is a corporate event and is a lot more structured. And then CCC is, CCC is my favorite, but there's just kind of a very different vibe going on there. But if you're interested in like really cool security stuff, that is where to find it. There's a talk from Black Hat this year where he's talking about finding a God instruction on a processor, and he does some really crazy stuff, but he's like actually fuzzing the hardware processor and like doing insane stuff, and he is like the de facto guy as far as this topic, and he talks for an hour on how he thinks and how he does it, and it's really, really cool information to learn about. And there's also like, for example, there's a talk from the people who write Burp Suite Portswigger, and they're talking about how you can attack web caches. And his whole point of the talk is everyone thought web cache poisoning was too hard, but he figured out how to do it. And so he has potentially opened up this entire new attack vector for the web surface, and he presented how to do it at a Black Hat talk, which is really cool. And then lastly, for a more regular thing, checking out news/blogs. The subreddit NetSec is my favorite. It's a nice way to get curated. These are cool things going on in security right now. And if you check it daily, they don't always have cool things, but they often have neat blog posts, and you will stay significantly up to date of a lot of your peers. Like when there was a vulnerability in Git this summer, and I found it, and I was like one of the first people at my work to realize that like we all needed to update Git. So that was like a practical, I told my whole team to update Git, and it was like actually a good thing. And also Hacker News, not necessarily hacking specifically, it's more of a technology stack thing, but they do have computer security stuff on there. And that is it for the actual presentation. We're going to move on to hacking next. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
More of a general comment, but another useful kind of overall tool is code tools. It's like
Yes.
a Python library. That's
Definitely.
through Python too, but it's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, PWN.
On that same front, there's a Git repo that is the pen testing like repo, I guess you could say, and it just basically I'll link it in Discord, but it's just a like list of all of the different like things you would use, things you need, information. A lot of the times you don't have internet when you're doing a pen test, so having something offline is a really good resource.
Yep. Yep. I did not know that. It's good to know. Okay. Interesting. But and like was said, often it's not essential to know how everything works, but to know where to find how something works, because there's no way you can fit all of the security knowledge in your head at one time. It's just not practical. But if you have a good set of resources you can go to and learn about, like as you need it, that will make you a much more successful person than trying to learn and memorize everything. Just as a disclaimer. But we'll move on to not hardware hacking, but physical access hacking. So how many of y'all here have a laptop? Like, raise your hands. So keep your hand up if you use full disk encryption. Put your hand down if you don't. Oh, this is a good day. So I'll spin up my Windows VM.
Anyone want to give me their laptop for 10 minutes?
So this is actually a really simple thing. Like what I'm about to do is by no means like impressive or challenging. It's just a fact of the matter that in most cases physical access is total access. So we have my Windows VM, and I can type in my password, and we're good to go. I log in, and it's a normal day. But now I have to go to the bathroom. I'm in a student union. So I leave it behind. I shut down because I'm smart. I'm not going to let anyone attack my system. And here is where the fun begins, when Andrew walks up, realizing I have left my laptop alone. So we will start with the most simple case, and then we'll move on to the more interesting case. Odds are, if y'all have been like following security for a little while, you've probably seen this before, but it will be more interesting at the end, I promise. So we will restart this. Give me a second. Let's see. 4. F6. Oh, that is the wrong ISO. One moment. Settings. Storage. That is the right ISO. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I would be doing this on the other screen, but the windows for VirtualBox pop in and out, and so it is difficult to hit all the keys in the right time and also have it over there. Okay.
Sounds like a Linux problem.
That it is. So I think I can live boot this. If I can't, we will have to do a different one, but that's okay. F1, help. I don't have access to my F keys. Unfortunate. Oh, there we go. Try Ubuntu without installing. That's what I was looking for. So what I'm doing right now is I'm booting an ISO, which will have access to the hard disk, but it is not actually writing anything to the hard disk, assuming it boots. And so anyone could put this on a flash drive and then walk up to your laptop, and then assuming you don't have your BIOS locked, which if you're not using full disk encryption, I am doubtful you have your BIOS locked. You might. But they can just walk up, plug in a USB port, plug in a USB to your USB port, and then boot off of a USB. And this doesn't necessarily sound useful until, if it'll boot. Oh man, that is by no means what I was looking for. Yeah, I will just go ahead and boot into a terminal only mode, and that'll make life easier. So I was going to use Ubuntu because it has a GUI and it's easier to follow, but we will go ahead and use TinyCore Linux because that will be easier. Yes, that is the thing I've been advertising about. That it is. So if you have never heard of TinyCore Linux, it is a 12 meg ISO that is an entire Linux installation, which is crazy because 12 meg is so incredibly small. But so we'll move over to here. So we boot into this Linux install. See if I can you all read that text? I assume not.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the back? Okay.
You go to view, and then you can increase the scale.
Scale factor.
View. Scaled mode?
No, down the bottom.
Scale factor. There we go. Thanks, friends. There we go. Hey, so can everyone see in the back? Hey. Now we can actually do the demo. So if we list dev, unfortunately TinyCore lists a bunch of crap that you don't need. But in general, the first hard disk you have is going to be SDA, and the Windows partition has a boot partition at SDA1, and then your actual directory at SDA2. Windows uses NTFS as its file format, or its disk format, which Linux does not have support for by default, but we can solve that by installing it. If you're trying to replicate this, you need to do the 3G repo. NTFS is supported read-only in the kernel, but NTFS 3G will allow you to mount it read-write. So we can mount your hard disk. NTFS 3G dev SDA2, which will be your hard disk, and then mount. Let me go check it out. So the device is currently sitting unaccessed. Whenever you run the mount command, you're taking that device and grafting it onto the file system. And so all you're doing is making the files available to the operating system that's currently running. Windows will normally do this for you by default. Linux will do that for your boot drive. But currently all we have done is taken the disk that's stored by the machine and we mounted it into our RAM ISO.
Now we can access it.
Yes. So at this point, you can access this person's entire file system. So if you have anything you don't want them to see, that's a bad time. But they can actually make it worse. So if we check out Windows, and we check out System32, the best directory. So they have a bunch of stuff in here. And wouldn't it be great if we could just get a shell on command? Like that's every hacker's dream. It's just you get a shell, snap your fingers. So it turns out, fortunately, there's this really great utility called magnify.exe. And if you didn't know, you can run this from the login screen. Anyone can. So we will first remove it. Yeah, sticky keys. You can do this with a bunch of different binaries. I do magnify because I remember the name of it. But any binary that can be launched at the login screen, you can do this with if you want. An executable, a program. So we can take cmd.exe.
System 32 is not a file.
It is not. It's a directory. And it's a directory containing a lot of core system utilities. So we have now taken what was magnify.exe and replaced it with cmd.exe, which doesn't really seem like that exciting. But if we reset the VM, and it will now boot into Windows, and you think, launch Windows normally, that's fine. Oh no, I launched in startup mode. My bad. That'll take a while. We will reset.
Dang it, Nick.
Start Windows normally. All right. Ideally, this hasn't broken anything. It shouldn't break anything if I did it right. And there we are. We have the Windows boot screen.
You might want to turn the scale factor back down a little bit.
That is a yeah, but I can't scroll. Oh, there we go. I'll scroll down. So down here we have our system utilities, and
Easier to use. Windows will read and implement automatic items on the screen. Larger, cancel.
so our magnifier, unfortunately, or I guess fortunately in our case, is not magnifying things. We have a shell, and if you look who we are NT authority system, which means we have full rights. That is all I did. That's exactly all I did. It was that simple.
Does anyone want to give me their laptop for like 10
So people are like, this is. So when I first saw this, we were actually trying to get back on my friend's computer back in high school because he forgot his password, and we did this to get back on, which was great. But we were like, I was like, this is so dumb. No one would ever do this. Like, this is not practical. 2 years ago, I think, someone published a research paper where they connected to open RDP sessions. And they just attempted to do this in one of the ways, either trigger sticky keys or hit magnify and see what happened. And they found that a decent percentage, I don't remember what it wasn't ridiculously high, but it was not negligible, percentage of open RDP sessions had this backdoor on them, like already. So they wrote an automated way to like scan for that, but this is a thing that actually has occurred in the wild in the past, which is kind of terrifying because it's so easy, and if you're not actively monitoring the hashes of the files on disk, it's really hard to catch unless you use magnify.exe frequently. Which if you do, I mean, that's fine. So we will then go back. Yeah, we have time. I will show, yeah.
In a lot of systems in the BIOS, it will allow you to set a password that's required on
Yes.
startup.
It'll prevent it, but they could still take your hard drive. So this is like way more work. They could take your hard drive out and do the same attack. But if you have a BIOS lock on your laptop to stop them from booting, and you don't want to do full disk encryption, that is a good second.
As an aside, you also have to make sure that if you're using a desktop that your back panel is locked in, because otherwise they just take the BIOS battery out and you're going to set the password immediately.
Not for Lenovo's. Fun fact.
So you have a Lenovo.
Lenovo's, it's stored in an EEPROM chip, and I've seen a video of people doing logic analysis to pull it out of the EEPROM, but I don't know how to do that, and I don't know anyone who can, so that's probably not super likely. So I will remove the back door so we can actually show something actually pretty cool. So we will mount the disk back to mount. I need to install the packages. Yeah. Don't run this as root. So TinyCore Linux is pretty neat if you've never played with it. It makes it really easy to build your own ISOs. And because they're so small, it makes for you can make fun things with it, I will say. And I'll show you what I made with it earlier this week. But so we'll go to Windows. And hopefully this works. I've tested it before, but I guess we will see if the demo gods are in my favor today. And we'll just remove magnify.exe because I blew away the old one anyway. Yes. And then reboot, and I will prove that I actually deleted it and it's gone. And unfortunately, Windows takes a while to boot. But we're good to go. So I'll scroll down. And at this point, the attack should no longer work. Magnify.exe is gone, and so it should just be angry with me. And I did not remove it. Rough. Yeah, unmount it, because the right probably didn't get synced to disk, I would assume. So we'll try that again. So I'm trying to show that it's gone. That way I can prove what I'm about to do is actually real and not fake. Because it's actually pretty interesting how quickly you can actually pull off that attack when well scripted. So mount attack T and TFS 3G dev SDA2. Because like the amount of time it takes me to do this is like kind of long. Like if you were just in the bathroom, the odds of being able to pull this off are, I'm skeptical. Like as long as you're quick, it's possible that you would be able to catch them while they were doing it, and then they would be out of luck.
Is that a challenge?
It is not a challenge because I prove how fast you can do it in a second.
Spend a lot of time in that lab.
Okay, and as recommended by Henry, we will unmount the disk, so the write will actually get synced.
You can only unmount things when you have root privileges.
If it was mounted by root, yes. Linux has something called Fuse, which is file system and user space. And that you can mount and unmount as user. But if it was mounted like an actual physical disk, most of the time you need to be root. OK, now we will boot into Windows. Start normally. Unfortunately, when you do this in VirtualBox over and over again, it does complain at you because you're just not shutting down properly. But that's OK. I have never had it actually cause problems. So now we will check and see that magnify.exe is hopefully gone. Aha! So magnify.exe did not get launched. We have successfully removed the backdoor.
Whoa, guys. You just removed the backdoor.
It's a bad thing.
That's what you did. You just unmounted System 32.
I did not unmount it. I removed the magnify.exe backdoor. It was cmd.exe named magnify.exe, and I removed that file.
What was it called? The backdoor for magnify.exe?
cmd.exe. So I will load a special ISO, which is slightly different than this one. And it is in my downloads directory Windows. And F12. 4. So you will see, so this is the boot screen. I have mounted my specially crafted ISO. And it's done. I'm assuming it worked. I got an error because magnify.exe did not exist, and the script I wrote assumed it did. So hopefully it worked. If not, that is too bad.
So once you remove the backdoor, even if they do that attack, mount System 32 and removes magnify.exe, it will not work. It will not be able to access all those core files in System 32.
So removing the backdoor does not prevent the attack. Someone could go back and do it again, which hopefully I'm about to prove.
Make your computer the item on the screen large enough. Cancel.
Yeah.
Now you clap.
So like in that short amount of time, I could have backdoored your system just because you left it out. There's actually ways to make this attack even more feasible. Similar things work on Linux or Mac OS. Like if your disk is not encrypted, anyone who comes by and can run code can do whatever they want to your disk. I have a version of this that works on Linux that will just take it'll mount your hard disk, it'll change the password for root to guest, and then unmount it. And it's actually even faster because you don't have to install the NTFS library. But if you don't have full disk encryption, I would highly recommend it. If you're not able to do full disk encryption, I would highly recommend a BIOS password, because physical access, as seen here, is total access. Like that was, I could very easily do that in the amount of time it takes for you to even just like go throw something away. Like that's very trivial.
So I know about BIOS password though. So you reset like with some difficulty by like removing the battery or some motherboards will have a reset button that will also do that. But a lot of manufacturers also have a master password for their BIOS. So definitely would not recommend look up whether or not master password is a thing for your hardware. And if it is, it's not actually going to do that much.
Yep. Full disk encryption is the only thing I personally recommend, just because it is the only way you know that you're going to be secure if you leave your laptop alone with it powered off. Well, reasonably. Yeah?
So on Mac OS, obviously, like, if you don't have full disk encryption, your personal files are all vulnerable. But how would SIP prevent or not prevent this kind of event?
SIP.
System integrity protection, it's a full encryption of all of your OS files.
So I don't know a ton about how Mac does stuff. If they're doing file integrity monitoring and checking the hashes of core libraries, like if they're checking etc password, then you should be good. But if it's not encrypted on disk, which I don't know in Mac and different versions if it is or not, then you're SOL.
In all of the most recent versions of Mac OS, SIP is enabled by default.
Good deal. So
You have to go into recovery mode in the terminal to be able to change that.
good deal. So if you have a Mac, you're probably good. Good to know. Thanks for sharing.
So, you mean recoverable load? Like it blocks it on purpose? I want to understand the point that she was making. What's the difference between Mac and Windows?
Mac is protecting its own system files very deliberately by default.
Yeah. Windows does not offer you the same niceties. And nor does Linux, like in a lot of cases. Like just to be clear, I'm not just bashing on Windows. Like Linux, full disk encryption is not necessarily the default. So if you didn't pick it, you probably don't have it.
But what files did you access in System 32 after moving that magnify XE?
So the backdoor is taking cmd.exe, which like you won't like. There's guaranteed to be on the system unless something really is really strange. And all you do is move that to replace magnify.exe. And so when this actually calls that binary, it just checks the path. Like it's not actually saying, hey, launch this specific binary. It just says, hey, load whatever file is at this path. And so you take cmd.exe and name it magnify.exe and remove the old one, and then this works.
So you just replace the backdoor and rename it magnify.exe?
Yes, I think.
So the magnify.exe has a backdoor where you could get the content within it?
No. So it is not a backdoor in the sense that you're actually backdooring magnify.exe. It's a backdoor in the sense that you can load it from the login screen. You're just getting rid of magnify.exe. Like it no longer exists on this system. The magnify.exe binary has been replaced with cmd.exe.
Oh, so essentially after you remove magnify.exe, you can load a bunch of files that may give you root privileges, won't give you root privileges on its backdoor cmd.
Yes, more or less.
Alright.
Yep.
Are there any antivirus systems that load before the OS that will check for this kind of thing? Or is it
I don't think so.
No.
Even if there were, it's not really a virus because CMD is built into Windows, so it
Yep.
won't catch it unless it's doing integrity protection, which is really weird for an antivirus.
Yeah, the solution is to be checking the hashes of these things. And if you're really interested, like the guy did do a talk on it. I can try to find it and share it. And that's one of the things he recommended is do file integrity monitoring of a lot of things in System 32 because they are loaded at interesting places like the login screen. But that's, I don't know if an antivirus would catch it even if it was that early. Yep.
Can you tell Windows not run any exe files unless those are updated?
I do not know. I'm not a Windows aficionado. It would, if you could disable the accessibility tools, yes, but I don't know if you can or not.
I don't think you can. But I'm not too sure.
But it's like, to be clear, full disk encryption solves these problems. Like, There's a lot of ways you could do it without full disk encryption, but full disk encryption will just solve these problems because unless they have the encryption key, they can't access your file system and they can't do any of this. They may be able to do some crazy stuff where they hack the firmware on your laptop or on your driver, not on your driver, on your disk or something like that. But if someone is doing that to you, I'm really curious why, because like that is some crazy stuff that I doubt they're targeting the college student with.
You don't know me, man.
You're right. You're right. Yep.
What's the performance hit on full disk encryption? Because I've heard it's really significant.
So on a hard disk, it's not the greatest. On an SSD, it's noticeable but not terrible. Your boot time is going to go down slightly, but like my laptop still boots quickly. I am using Linux, but it is not enough, in my opinion, to be a deal breaker. If you're using a hard disk, it might be, but it is what it is. Hard disks are already slow, so it's going to make it slower. Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll wrap up. Come join us on Friday.
Okay, wait, beforehand, I just want to say, someone was scanning UTD or CSG.UT Dallas from this room. If you're on a Dell laptop, don't do it. And don't SSH in, because I can see that too.
But join us on Friday if you're interested in hardware hacking. I'll be slowly figuring it out. Hopefully we'll get a custom firmware on my laptop and not break it. But for real, join us on Saturday for the CTF. If you don't know what you're doing, that's okay.
What time is it? This Saturday?
Yes.
What time?
It'll be from 1 to 5. You can come and go.
1 and 5. 1 to 5. All right.
Yep.
Thanks for answering my questions.
Yeah, sure thing.
Extending the material.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to help. Yeah, thanks for coming.
Slide gotta be online.
Yeah, we'll post it on the website.
So what was the link for the CTF again?
It's ctf.utdcsg.club. Yes.
I'm curious. So like, what's like the range of spots? Is it like mostly beginner stuff like this, or like how often do you do like technical stuff? Or like?
So we're going to be doing more technical stuff starting our next meeting that isn't Elastic. And we'll be trying to do a deep dive on topics from like getting started with web and like doing more advanced things at the end of the meeting. But we tend to be more beginner focused simply because we have so many beginners at UTD. If you're interested in more advanced stuff, you can hang out on Discord. Like we talk about more stuff that we're like really interested in there. But we are probably more targeting in between beginner and intermediate, not necessarily advanced. All right.
What's that?
Yep.
I'll see you on Friday.
Yeah, awesome.
This happen every week, or?
Yeah, we meet every Wednesday except for the first Wednesday of the month.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't fully remember your name.
Nick.
Nick, nice to meet you, Nick. I'm Henry.
Okay.
Him and I are just completely new. Like, I know bare bones nothing at all about this, but I would love to learn more.
Sure.
You said a lot of tools and practices.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
Where's like the first
Tutorials, like what are the first
what are we
stepping stones that we should be taking? Like, where are they?
First stepping stones. I would say first stepping stone is, yeah, I think Bandit is a good first stepping stone.
Okay.
The over-the-wire Bandit. I'll post the slides, and we can also mention that in Slack. But I think, do either of y'all know Linux?
I know of. I don't know. I've never used it before.
Yeah, that'll teach you Linux, and if you're comfortable with Linux, that'll make anything you do on Kali a lot easier. And I think that's a good path to getting started.
Install Linux on, like, if you can, as a second OS on your whatever system you use every day, and just get used to using the terminal.
All right.
That really helps too.
Cool. Thank you.
Does this Mac that you're interested in also work on Windows 10 now, or?
Yeah, it works on every version of Windows.
No, those like command just type, it's gotta be on the slide too, or is it?
I can add it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What was that, the really small Linux kernel?
Tiny Core Linux.
Huh, okay.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. The ISO build process is pretty good. If you check tools, I posted a link to my build process a little far back. It's the repo's TC build, but I mean it was really trivial to write that. And the Linux one is even faster, which is pretty neat.
Huh, neat.
Yeah.
If we show up to the CTF, do we have to have like a team?
We will be one big team.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So there's nothing I need to like install on my laptop or anything before I go to get started?
If you come with Kali, that may make your life easier. But Kali Linux, you can install it as a virtual machine. and that'll probably make your life easier. But if you show up and don't have it, we can help you get it installed.
All right, cool. Thank
Yeah.
you. Well, the details will be like on display.
Yep.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Do you have any place where you can get like the previous videos?
Yeah, so we post, if you check our website, every meeting should have slides and a video linked to it. We have a YouTube channel where we have everything that we've actually filmed. And then we also have a slide share. But if you click any of the links, it should take you to the respective profile.
Do you know anyone that can do the encryption for the hard drive?
Encryption for the hard drive. Okay, are you using Windows?
Yes.
I'd look into BitLocker. Yeah, BitLocker. Yep. Yeah.
Hey, just wanted to let you know, I thought it was really informative.
Oh, thanks.
I really liked it. So I'm getting started, and like, this semester is like the first time I'm actually taking steps towards it. So I've talked to different people, they've made like recommendations, stuff like Bulb Hub, I think they mentioned stuff that you mentioned. So I guess I'm a little paranoid, like, how do you like stay safe?
Stay what?
Stay safe, because I think someone has said like, make sure you're not like connected to the internet.
So it's just like whenever you're doing something, I would recommend running it in a virtual machine.
Okay.
And just be careful. Like, make sure that virtual machine is not outward facing. Like it's only internal to your laptop, and that should cover the majority of the security sites. The majority of these security sites do put efforts in place to make sure you're not hacked while you're learning. But it's really just I wouldn't run anything on your base system that you don't trust a lot.
Okay. So like I guess this is gonna sound like a dumb question. Like so starting a virtual machine. That's like what you were doing with like it was almost like inside. Okay. So that's interesting. So like technically speaking, that wasn't like actually installed on your laptop, right?
It was not installed directly on my laptop, no.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look into, are you running Windows?